Yes, sir. The boys are back. The feeling is restored. What's up? This is EJ Stewart of New Generation Media, New Generation Hero Talk, joined by Shamari, joined by Kendall for a very special presentation that we are doing. It's kind of a thing we've been talking about for a while, thing we've been working on. I know we've been a little bit down on the YouTube channel, though. If you will listen to our podcast, we've been doing the podcast pretty consistently, New Generation Hero Talk, wherever you get your podcast. But we put it out on Twitter. I made the announcement as well on my own Twitter. This will be the beginning of a new launch. It's a new day in Marvel Studios, new day in the world of X-Men. X-Men 97 has dropped, which means we now have episodes to discuss, and we'll be bringing back our weekly recaps for Marvel television shows, beginning with X-Men 97. So we're doing this live stream Wednesday, March 20th. We'll be recapping the first two episodes of X-Men 97, the continuation of the X-Men animated series that Marvel just dropped. This was a massive day, a day we'd all been talking about. Honestly, I gotta drop it one time before we continue. I mean, we're here. We are here. X-Men 97 is out. I cannot wait to talk about it with my guys. Again, Shamari's here. Kendall's here. I'm here. Should be a blast. Shamari, how do you feel about the return of X-Men with X-Men 97?
Man, EJ, when that theme I saw that. So to be honest, I watched right before I watched the episode. I watched the last episode of the X-Men show on Disney.
Yep.
It's on Disney Plus. So I just watched that.
Yep.
So I almost regretted it because I was like, man, if I had just jumped in and just seen that intro, like having not watched it for like several years, oh my gosh, like though even seeing it, I had goosebumps. I was like,
See, I did the opposite. I did not watch because I've been so busy. I didn't get a chance to watch and catch up. So I just went in cold, and that intro dropped. And as people follow me on social media, EJ_Stewart on X/Twitter. I posted on Instagram as well. I mean, that was my raw reaction to the open. I didn't know exactly what the open was gonna be. I thought it would be the same song, but I wanted to see it. As soon as the first two notes hit, the "Let's effing go" rant I went on, like that was a legit, true feeling of how I felt when it dropped.
Yeah, it's so iconic, and like even watching the previous one right before watching it, I'm just like, boy, that's a really underrated intro. Just like in general, it's so good. Even the new one is fantastic. I don't even know if it lives up to the old one necessarily. Just it's so good. The episode was fantastic. I loved it. Or both of the episodes that dropped. The animation was incredible. The story was really good. Definitely lived up to the original show.
Yeah.
It was just a great experience. It was just watching X-Men.
Kendall, you got to check out these first two episodes. What was your feeling getting the first drop from X-Men 97 here? First time in what? When they're talking about 20, almost 30 years at this point. I mean, 28 years, 27 years. I mean, how'd you feel about these first two episodes that they dropped?
Man, so my experience is different than you guys because obviously I was born in 1998, so the show was already done by the time I was born. But obviously watching it through reruns as a kid, I had a similar experience, but slightly different. You're watching the X-Men movies as the show was going on, and you got X-Men Evolution playing at the same time, and then you have X-Men, the animated series playing, at different various times as well. And so my nostalgia is a little bit different than maybe the average fan for this show, but like you said, when you see that intro, I like EJ, I didn't necessarily see the end of the series recently, didn't rewatch it, so I also came in cold turkey, and I mean, like you said, the nostalgia just hits you right away. I thought that they would do a lot more to change the intro, and they kind of just kept it the same, and kept a lot of the same animation.
Updated the animation, really, but
added a couple of characters, all the same scenes. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and so they decided that's what we're gonna do, and it worked. And in terms of the series, I'll be honest, I leading up to the series, I didn't love the marketing campaign that much. I thought that the trailers were good, but I thought that the some of the posters and stuff they were leaning a lot into that nostalgia thing. And it was like, oh, remember when you were a kid? And it's like, for me, I was like, is this going to be good? I want to make sure because that's what the show was. People love the show because it was a great show, not because we watched it when we were 5 years old. And so I figured it would be good, but I didn't love the marketing campaign. But watching these two episodes, like I almost feel like the marketing did this a disservice because I felt like they focused again a lot on the nostalgia and not on like what is clearly a really 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 good show. And again, this show reminded the people of that. And again, I thought it was an excellent 2 episode premiere. I'm glad they released it in 2 episodes. I think that was smart. I don't know what episode 3 is going to look like, but I know these first 2 were definitely a good first 2 to start with. So
yeah,
we'll get to it, but I have nothing but good things to say.
same here, man. So again, just for those on the live stream, this is New Generation Hero Talk. This is our newly launched X-Men 97 weekly reviews we'll be doing. Obviously, these 2 episodes just dropped. There were 10 episodes, I believe, in the entire season, so we'll have 8 more of these. So I know people have been clamoring to asking when you can get back on YouTube. Well, this is our first foray back. Every week you'll be getting your recap of X-Men 97. We begin talking about these 2 episodes. So you had the season premiere, which was To Me, My X-Men. You had the second episode, Mutant Liberation Begins. Both episode names obviously very fitting for what happens. I'll start with my thoughts on the first episode overall. I felt like I think the fight animation on this to me hit me immediately as soon as this episode began. Like I think like as soon as I see Cyclops using his like optic beams to actually move around surfaces to get around bad guys and avoid being shot at, I'm like, okay, this is not the same X-Men show I saw from the 90s. I love the X-Men show. Everybody knows how much I live and die by it. I'm wearing the Gambit shirt today. But like, as soon as I saw that, I'm like, okay, we're in a whole different ballgame. This is going to be X-Men from the 90s meets Young Justice meets Spectacular Spider-Man. In some ways, I feel like we're still probably only scratching the surface for what we'll see from the fight animation. But that stood out. I think this one really, I thought, maybe surprisingly to me, I was surprised at how snippy the X-Men were. I kind of felt like, watching back, you kind of forget sometimes just how animus some relationships were among the different X-Men members: Wolverine, Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, the kind of
Wolverine and everybody else.
yeah, Wolverine and everybody else for sure. Sometimes Cyclops and Gambit, like there's a very imperfect family, and I think because we think of nostalgia, I thought maybe they want to play on them kind of being a team unit, and in some ways they do play on that a little bit because they're able to wash the Friends of Humanity fairly easily, and they kind of wash what's the name, Trask also pretty easily, showing you, okay, this is a team that's well seasoned and they know what they're doing, and Master Mold as well. But you still see some of the inner strikes that still are present. It's not like necessarily these people have matured so much that those things don't still exist. So I think seeing though that strike still exists among the team and those little intricacies, I think were great. And I think actually was a true testament to the 90s show, because that was such an important part of the 90s show, how much they really did not get along. And this episode, there was no sugarcoating those relationships that existed. They kind of kept them along. Sham, were you surprised just at how much the sniping we saw even in episode 1, considering, this is now, what we were talking about, 5 years removed from when we first saw this team together?
A little bit. I forgot how. The first word that comes to mind is annoying. Scott was
Yeah,
as the leader, and how he kind of just annoyed by everybody or just getting on people's nerves. And it just kind of reminded me. I was like, oh yeah, he used to have a very short fuse in that old show. Like he wasn't dealing with nothing. He was very very quick to say no, Wolverine, or no, why are we doing this? So but But yeah, I was a little surprised. I was expecting everything to kind of be more cohesive, but then at the same time, um, Professor X was also very much the glue, I
Mm.
think, of the team as well. So with him being, uh, either dying or being close to death, that was, I'm sure a big blow
Yeah.
to them as a unit. Because he was very much kind of like the parental figure,
Yeah.
and the family, or I guess the people would bicker and kind of snipe at each other, but he would kind of try to keep them together. Um, so yeah, it did kind of remind me of that dynamic.
It was funny, Kendall, and I want to talk about Charles in a second, but talking about the Cyclops, he's such an interesting character because he's kind of been. It feels like he's probably gone through the ringer. It feels like almost since like the 2000s in almost all mediums, whether it be animation, whether it be certainly live action, and of course, um, in the comics as well. I, I really enjoyed this because I think this felt like a true kind of update to Cyclops because while I think the '90s show did a good job of kind of creating him as kind of this like very serious, straight laced Boy Scout. Scott also has a little bit of swagger and a little bit of toughness to him that I don't think the '90s show quite captured that great. I don't know if really, besides like maybe the more recent X-Men comics we've seen or some of the stuff earlier with Claremont, ever captured perfectly per se. Like he's annoying, yes he's a little bit of like a straight laced guy, but he's also kind of dope. He's also kind of a badass. He's got some swagger too. Yeah, he's almost kind of like I don't want to call him like I was gonna say John Cena. I don't know if I go that far, but like there's a little bit to him. Like there's a reason why Jean, even though she's got things Wolverine, but I think Cyclops has got a little swagger to him too. What I liked about this, and I don't know how you felt about it, Kendall. I felt like they were able to kind of him with the trash talking to like the Friends of the Humanity, some of the conversations that he was having. Like they added a little teeth and a little bit of backbone to him that didn't make him seem so much just like this, just like Boy Scout that I think I really appreciate it. And I think Cyclops fans will love from this. It definitely feels like, again, they've taken kind of what we've seen from him, gone through the ring as a character, but he's added a lot of character development over the last 20 years. It felt like they actually packed a lot of that into just some of the stuff we saw in these first two episodes, and particularly the first one for sure. Did you see that as well?
Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, I mean, Cyclops is a character that, I mean, you put it, perfectly. We say he's gone through the ringer. Very inconsistent in how he's portrayed, which is
Yeah.
fine to a degree. Sometimes you don't want every iteration of every character to be exact same, but um, so there's been a lot of common denominators with a lot of the bad Cyclops versions is like the drunk over Jean being gone or something like that, whether it be
Right.
Wolverine the X-Men or the James Marsden version, and so it's like that clearly again we don't have that version of Cyclops here. We talk about that swag, part of him. I thought a show not to. I'll try my best, as the resident X-Men Evolution fan on this show, to not bring that show up a lot on this, but that show did a good job of like not making him so straight laced. Like he's the captain, but he wasn't like
Yeah.
a complete Boy Scout in that show.
Right.
This show captures a lot of that version of Cyclops in this as well. And yeah, I agree. I mean, I thought they did an excellent job of that. I thought that there was a really nice kind of tug and pull that, him and Jean were going through with like, you know, them feeling a responsibility as being like the first class of
Mm-hmm.
Charles Xavier to like stay with the X-Men, but at the same time knowing like, they've got a kid on the way and do they
Yeah.
want to, kind of, spread their wings, so to speak. So it's a really good storyline in there. And again, it's not about, you know, Jean Grey being on her deathbed or anything like that, or Jean Grey being captured. It's not a damsel in distress story as much as it's a different type of story with those two characters. So yeah, I thought that his character development was really good, no doubt.
And I think you make a good point that I think Cyclops at his worst is when he's sad sack Cyclops. I think, and they had every reason to give you that. He's kind of like that, and he's definitely like that in Wolverine and X Men. He's like that in a lot of the definitely in the X Men Last Stand version we saw, and that Cyclops I think is the one we all hate the most maybe. And considering we're entering this show with the understanding that Charles Xavier in their minds is dead. That he's, if you watch that last episode, which I actually ended up watching after I watched these 2 episodes, I wanted to go back to see how that last episode actually play out. It's funny. The last episode it's he definitely dies, but it's a little more ambiguous than like this was. Like this makes it seem like he's just dead. The last episode, like Landra takes him. It's like, hey, the Shi'ar, medicine
keep him alive.
Could probably keep him alive. But then he's like, well, I don't know if my body's ever gonna be alive, but my spirit will always be alive. But he's not talking to them in this episode. He's not like, he's not coming down, be like, hey, X-Men, stop bickering and like get on the same page. Like, there's none of that. So I get the impression they have not talked to him since that scene on his quote unquote deathbed. So they move on with the assumption that he's dead. And from that standpoint, you think that you might have seen a Cyclops that's a little more aloof, a little more sad sack, that is, basically surrogate father is dead. Whereas here you see him determined and you see him kind of trying to, carry that mantle, and we see how personally he takes that mantle when we see episode 2 when Magneto kind of rips it from him. So I think that also ended up playing out really well. So that first story ended up kind of being twofold. It was the race to find Trask, to figure out why there was new Sentinel equipment being gone out, and the kind of introduction to Sunspot, who is the mutant that they find in this that he's captured, and they're gonna sell him for ransom. Like, and he's a mutant that we learn is kind of, I don't want to say, well, he's a little ashamed of him as being a mutant. His family doesn't know he's a mutant. He lets that be very clear. He's a rich kid, got a lot of personality, but he's not quite down for the cause, that they would say. So it kind of created an interesting dynamic. Very rarely do you get people who save your life, and then he's like really not all of that like thankful for it. He doesn't seem to really care all that much. He's supposed to kind of move on with his day. He doesn't feel any kind of obligation to them. Shamari, what did you think of the introduction of Sunspot in this episode?
I thought it was cool. You don't really see his powers until this story is kind of
the combo the combo with Jubilee.
Yes. But I thought it was cool. I thought it definitely kind of served the purpose of kind of planting his roots potentially as an X-Men going forward, especially what Jubilee said, with him possibly staying around. And it also, of course, was a way for the team to kind of get back into their kind of mode of helping their own, wherever they're needed. So I definitely liked his inclusion. I'm hopefully looking forward to him sticking around and seeing a bit of that story. Jubilee, of course, reminding him that she was kind of in a similar spot as well. So yeah, that's definitely a story that I am hopeful and looking forward to sticking around and seeing him hopefully become maybe a part of the team. I mean, I could see this being maybe reminiscent of like the Spike kind of dynamic that we saw in X-Men Evolution. I know Kendall, of course, is very familiar with that storyline. So
not talking about it.
So yeah, that's kind of what I am thinking we may see, and kind of hoping we might see.
You talk about again animation. The animation I thought popped when he showed his powers, just how much better the animation is now. Also, the scene in the nightclub as well. Also, the lighting is gorgeous. The art in this is absolutely gorgeous in a lot of this. So one thing I want to mention too, and Kendall mentioned or maybe you mentioned the Jubilee kind of mentioning that his story is similar to hers. Great callback to the very first episode of X-Men the Animated Series. That was the one thing one of the things that really stood out to me, and Kendall mentioned it as well when Jean talked about being essentially, the first class of X-Men. There are some things in that first show that they really kind of like truly glossed over. I think like the aspect of Scott and Jean being part of the first X-Men class, like I think it may be in the Iceman episode, they kind of briefly mention it. It's kind of like in the backdrop of his story, in that like one episode he's in, that's about him. I don't even know how much they even really talked about it much with Angel. There are very few flashback scenes. They you probably count them on one hand. That's not something they actually really touch on at all. One of the things I loved in this episode was how much they actually touched back on that first class, in that this is not like when you watch those episodes initially, you get the impression, oh, this is like a brand new team that's been put together, even though like, Jubilee and Wolverine are maybe the newest members. You get the feeling that this was always been the team. And it's not until you watch later episodes and later seasons that you realize that's not the case. But I thought that the fact that they hit certain things home that maybe the first show didn't, very like aggressively, but I thought was great because it helps you build lore. It kind of was a little world building similar to Young Justice that I enjoy. Even though these are things that actually did happen on camera, but kind of like hitting you home with like, hey, these are aspects of these guys, these characters and their motivations that like influence the things they do, and like you should have that in your mind whenever they do anything. So I that was like a small thing that they harkened back on quite a bit that I actually enjoyed a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. It's sort of, I don't really know what you call it. It's almost like a character Bible, so to speak, where it's like you give these characters all backstory. Every show's got a Wikipedia page, where they've got, mounds of information, especially stuff maybe even behind the scenes that maybe we don't even know, but they're writing these characters with that intention, that and these little details, like you said, that maybe they don't harp on constantly, but every decision that has happened throughout the show is based off of the things about them. And, they're not just making these decisions randomly. It's a lot of stuff that's happening later in the show. These other characters and these decisions that are made are intentional. We'll talk about Magneto. We'll talk about Storm. We'll talk about Rogue. All of these things that happen with all these different characters, there's specific things about them for why these decisions are being made, and it's not made lightly. And so, yeah, I mean, I agree with 100%. I also want to give a shout out to Ray Chase, who voiced Cyclops in this show, because obviously Norm Spencer passed away in 2020. He was the original voice actor for Scott Summers in the original X-Men the animated series, and it came out this week that Kevin Feige, one of his mandates for this show, for it to come out, was they needed the original voice cast back, and they needed the original theme song. They needed to buy back the original theme song, and so obviously, Cyclops was one of the characters they would have had to have recasted, and that was a major role. And again, shout out to Ray Chase, because he did an excellent job. I believe they also recasted Jubilee as well. She did an excellent job. So again, the voice cast altogether, obviously Cal Dodd, just as good as as ever as Wolverine. So
Goat, yeah.
And again, the cast did an excellent job.
They did do an excellent job, and I think that's an appropriate shout out as well. I feel like Storm in these episodes, I love Storm, and you want to talk about, there are plenty of The Rock goosebump moments. I could have like went to my arm and just pointed to goosebumps, but none maybe more ever than Cyclops being, let's give them the forecast, and then you just hear something that'll be Omega level threat in the area, and what's about to happen. I mean, it's kind of sick, because we, the only reason we even know about the idea of sand glowing is unfortunately because of war, but like them actually showing like what would happen with like that kind of weather event hitting that amount of sand in the Sahara Desert. You hear Warmonger say we're going to make the sand glow. That's literally what Storm did to just eviscerate the whole Master Mold clique of Sentinels. And I'm like, this is awesome. But at the same time, Storm's kind of role in this season so far feels a little Aaron Rodgers with the Jets. It feels like she came out there with the American flag and the crowd going crazy, and then 4 plays in, she blew out the Achilles. I'm like, yo, what's going on? Like, and I'm okay with it, because I think, one, they established her immediately as like the strongest X-Men. There's just really no conversation. As soon as that scene happens, okay, we know who the strongest X-Men is. But I do wonder. I think that this is actually going to take her on an interesting tour, as we kind of we'll jump back and forth through episodes. We don't have to go necessarily 1, 2, but like seeing how now she took that bullet literally for Magneto, and now you have a situation where she is quote unquote no longer a mutant permanently. Again, we'll see. Nothing usually lasts forever. Shamar, do you like the direction where that's going? What do you think of them making that character decision?
I mean, that would probably be my only kind of downside is them taking out Storm so fast. Like I'm gonna be honest. So her scenes were incredible. I
Yep.
agree, incredible, goosebumps, but it's one of those things where you're like, finally, right? Like as someone
Right.
who like paid attention to Storm for many years, obviously, Omega level mutant, often overshadowed in the movies and all these other things.
And honestly, this show, that '90s animated series, outside of course the comics that have done a fantastic job of Storm over decades, that show was really the only show that has truly done her justice. So it felt like good that you see immediately they were still going to also continue that until you get to
Yeah,
episode 2.
she gets a cool new hairstyle, cool new like kind of look and
Yep.
everything, and you're like, wow, man, this is when we really get Storm. Bam. And it's like, oh, she no longer have her powers, and I'm like, oh boy, all right, and then she's like, oh, give me to me straight, Hank. I'm like, oh boy, here we go. You're gonna say she's never gonna get her powers back. Here we go. So I'm like, so hopefully, I'm hoping that's just not true. I'm hoping halfway through the season, maybe, Hank, there's some kind of cure, some kind of reverse, something where they can, I don't know, put her in a tank of some kind, give her powers back, something, right? So that's my hope. But that was the only thing where I was like, I mean, they couldn't, I don't know, they couldn't have,
Well,
take that bullet. So
it makes you wonder why they would make such a rash decision, because you get the impression that Storm, we're going to see her, but she's, in terms of being in combat and being able to be the force that she is, probably kind of on the sidelines for a while. But it makes you kind of wonder, she's going to have to get her powers back. How's she going to go about doing that? Well, I know she's initially going to Moore Island to Moira McTaggart, who is always useless, so that's not going to go anywhere. But this is Marvel Studios production. Does she make a trip to Wakanda? Is that how we get maybe the return of Storm with her powers, and does that kind of make us get those connections to the larger Marvel cinematic, Marvel not cinematic universe, but Marvel universe that we didn't quite see so much in the X-Men show. We saw a lot in the Spider-Man show. X-Men, they kind of kept it within X-Men because there are millions of mutants. You don't have to really expand too far beyond that. But taking Storm away, who knows where she's going? I jumped to where could she be going to kind of get her back to get her powers? Who could fix her? Who has kind of technology and intelligence to do that? With that links to Storm, the first place I thought was Wakanda, Black Panther. So I wonder if that may be where this goes. I think that would be an interesting thing to follow. So first episode, again, we see the X-Men, a little bit of strife. Jean, Cyclops wondering should they stay or go. Jean thinking about the baby. We see that, of course, she's pregnant. I'm also going to start using Jean in quotation marks because of how the second episode ends. But Jean is contemplating maybe they should leave the X-Men. And Cyclops saying, we got to stay. We got to do this because this is the Professor's vision. We got to see it through. And they wash, again, Trask and Master Mold, only to then come back home as Cyclops kind of tries to kind of mend fences a little bit with the team because he was being a little ornery in the episode because he's Scott Summers. And they pull up to the crib and they see a threat, and it's Magneto, who says that in Charles's final will, he gave everything to Eric. Kendall, I'm curious. Do you buy this is something that Charles would have actually done, and do you take this at face value that this is indeed what he wanted? Because I think we're taking it at face value for now, but as you know, Cyclops, of course, being the most skeptical of it, Eric had the famous line of like, "Well, you should know that Charles Xavier now makes mistakes." Like, is this just a mistake from him? Because like, there's no way giving Eric the keys to the X Mansion is a good idea, right?
Man, that's definitely one of those kind of trippy, things that's supposed to mess with your head, and you really don't know. There really is no right answer right now. Like you say, so you almost have to just take it at face value until you see more. Um, that honestly, like it played well in a trailer. There's a part of me that wonders if I would have rather them not even showed that in the trailer, because it's a great ending to an episode. It's a great moment, um, but it was it's an interesting. It created an interesting storyline in episode 2 because, like you said, I mean, now there's a natural skepticism from Cyclops, kind of wrecked their plan, so to speak. And it's not uncommon that, there are storylines where Magneto's a part of the X-Men. It's not like
Yeah,
that's
or
never
that
been a
he's leading the
thing.
X-Men. This is
Exactly.
very 90s.
Yes, exactly. And so, um, again, not an impossible storyline, and it's played out really well in this series. And again, I go back to what I said earlier, what you said earlier about the character decisions and the logic behind their decisions, and you know, Charles Xavier, obviously, you have to go off of what the original source material created, um, and the for him to make these decisions, and that is probably an even longer. You could probably do a 30-minute, 40-minute essay video on him making that decision and what
Yeah.
could have gone into that. But but Magneto, all the things he does in this episode, like that scene that we get of him at the end, on the crater above Earth, and
Yeah.
hovering over Earth, and giving his monologue, like, really, again, with an introspection into his mentality and why he's not being as aggressive as he would normally be, and why he's not seeking world domination, which uh towards the end of X-Men the animated series he was seemingly close to doing, and they
Right.
they, they were kind of on the brink. And so, until obviously he found out Charlie Xavier was dying, he kind of,
Yeah.
all right, let me put the guns down. Let me, let's come together, so to speak. And that was, again, this ties really well into how that ended. And again, I thought the dynamics throughout the episode were really interesting, with Magneto.
Yeah.
And I mean that the scene with the UN, I think is that was, in my opinion, I think that was the best sequence that we had in this 2 episode arc,
Yeah.
and it was great.
Yeah, to me, if you had any qualms about Charles not being in the picture with this X-Men team and Magneto being the leader, I feel like that should have went away as soon as you watch episode 2. Like, I could understand on face value seeing that and being like, oh, do I want to see Magneto leading the X-Men? Like, what? This feels a little gimmicky. But this Magneto does not mess around. And because it's 2024 and it's not 1996 or 1992 when the show was created, the undertones of what Magneto's dialogue is written can now be overtones. You don't have to really mince words as much. You're not on Fox. You're not you don't have to stick to a Y or a Y7 rating. And I'm not to say he was cursing or saying anything crazy, but the monologues and his dialogue, whether it was to the UN Council when he was on trial or when he took. I mean, that scene when he pulls them up into the orbit, I'm like, this is gonna be a bloodbath, and I can't wait. This is gonna be awesome. But then the monologue he goes on, and
Yeah, and
then
the
says,
restraint he
"Well,
shows.
and the restraint he shows is so powerful," and I thought was important because at this moment, Eric is gonna eventually go to what he believes in, but you clearly see how much the commitment to Charles Xavier, how much that means to him, how much that friendship does mean to him, because he essentially, as he says there, he's essentially putting his own beliefs really to a certain degree to the side. He never really conforms and suggests that like Charles' way is right. He's thankful for Charles. He says that again. There are such little nuances to like what he says that's so powerful. He says, "I thank my Charles because he has created an environment for mutants that is better than it was." Something that maybe he would have never said to Charles in his face as they were going back and forth, but he admits it in Charles's death and talking to these UN senators and your UN council people, and also saying that like in order for me to like honor what he did, I can't do what I want to do. But I'm doing that because Charles and his memory deserves it. I feel like watching that last episode again after this episode, and know that there's a scene where scene when they kind of they bring Eric is about to again basically have his mutants just go ham as soon as the assassination attempt happens, and they kind of convince him to help Charles because they tell him, hey, Charles is like dying. Like, don't believe that thing you saw. That was Morph just pretending he was okay. He's not okay. And he enters the the bed, I guess the not a hospital, but I guess the room where Charles is in. And the first thing one of them asks is like, are you like really how much do you really love Charles? And he's like, how could you even ask me that question? Like, to me, like, that scene felt such like a continuation of a lot of dialogue from Eric in this episode. So he was awesome. I agree with him. I think Magneto's insertion, which I was intrigued by, but I wasn't 100% sold. I didn't see how it was going to be actually executed. I thought it executed flawlessly. How did you feel about Magneto in these mostly the last episode, the second episode, Mutant Liberation Begins, Sham?
I thought it was really good. I basically echo all your sentiments, EJ. To me, he really earned that spot in the intro sequence, which shout out to the intro people for giving him a little segment.
As soon as he showed up, I thought all my yelling was done after watching the first intro, but then I watched the second one, thinking it's gonna be just the same one, and I see Magneto show up as the first person, and I'm like, let's go.
I'm like, no, I love it. And then they had like a few different little things in there too, like towards the end. I'm like, yeah, no, I want them to do that every week now. I want them to add something, add a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Yeah. And you can see a little bit of what we're gonna see in the season, so that's pretty fun. But yeah, I liked Magneto a lot. Interesting that he had a thing with, and I don't know, you guys can maybe refresh my memory, that he had a thing with Rogue. Was that a thing in the original?
Not in the show.
This is something that was not in the show, but is in the comics. This is a thing that did happen, and shout out to my boy Gambit. Like, Gambit, I know you're probably gonna get unalived if you square up, but you gotta square up.
Pour one out for Gambit.
You got to square up with Eric, man. This is BS. Like anybody who knows me knows I'm a Gambit stan and love Mr. and Mrs. X, and like, I don't know what to say. This is bad for him, and I love that too. I love that they showed Gambit. Gambit is not a character really like, and one of the criticisms the Gambit character has is they don't feel like he has a lot of depth, and a lot of emotion. He's always just kind of trying to be the cool guy.
It's loose,
and like, because a lot of people say that, the critics of him say that when he was created, they essentially tried to create another Wolverine. So in some ways, he's like almost like a caricature of Wolverine. But I disagree. I think that he has shown a lot of depth when he's been written well, and I think to see him in tears, seeing that was, man, you don't see that very often. So, and that will then also add another dynamic to this that goes purely beyond the can we trust Magneto, considering his vision for the future of humankind and mutant kind is not the vision that we fight for. Now it becomes on an interpersonal level as well that I think will create a lot of tension, and I think it will be good tension. I hate to see it purely because, like, I'm thinking, oh man, we're a year removed. Like, Gambit and Rogue are probably like happily together at this point, and that's not where they are. And we see is Magneto's ability to touch Rogue is what brings them together, because the way he can manipulate magnetic fields, and that's gonna be one to follow for sure. But yeah, that is a relationship that was in the comics, and this show is very 90s. Very 90s, not just in the look, not just in like the aesthetic, not just in the dialogue, but also in like the story they teased and the stories they developed, which brings us to the end of the last episode where they open the door after again, Jean reads the letter from Storm. Storm has left the team. She says goodbye. And they get a ring at the door and they think it's Storm coming back, and in fact it is someone else saying it's Jean. They are Jean, and that they need to be assisted immediately. and they look like they've been beat up. They look like they've had rough days. And for those who probably are unfamiliar, or I don't say unfamiliar, but those who maybe are confused, because we saw earlier in the episode in that massive fight at the UN, Jean goes into labor. One of the best lines in the whole episode is Jean telling Wolverine, "I'm going into labor," and Jean's like, "He's coming," and he's like, "Who? Apocalypse?" Like, just it's perfectly delivered, perfectly timed. Just so Wolverine and so Jean, like their dynamic was perfect in that entire scene. Him driving and her doing telekinesis to move people and pets out of the way. That scene was also awesome as well, amidst all the chaos. But you see this, and you're like, what the hell? Now, if you're familiar with Cable, who they named their son Nathan Summers is Cable. Cable's mom is not Jean Grey. Cable's mom is Madeline Pryor, who was essentially a Jean Grey clone-like person that was made to look just like Jean Grey, but was actually created by Mr. Sinister. Which makes now all this come together with why we heard that Mr. Sinister was the villain, the main villain of the season. Not like he hasn't been a main, not a main villain, but a primary antagonist throughout the entire first show. Like, he's always been that. But this makes a lot more sense because this is going to get very personal very fast for Scott when he perhaps learns that he's been duped, where Jean's been gone all this time and he actually hasn't been with the real Jean. So I'll go to you first, Shan. What did you think of the plot twist at the end?
Crazy plot twist. Did not see it coming. Probably should have, considering all the since we know Mr. Sinister was going to be heavily involved in the season. But yeah, very unexpected considering everything that happened, especially with Storm just left and all this kind of drama. Smart that they made it so that like Morph opened the door, because he would have been my first guess. But like Morph is the one that went and opens the door and you see Jean. So everyone's confused. Everyone's like,
that's a good
what's
point.
going
That's
on?
actually a good point. I didn't even think about that Morph opening the door automatically takes him off the board.
Yeah, because I would have paused. I would have paused and be like, "Where's Morph?" But
that's funny.
Yeah, so so no one knows what's happening. So it was a good twist, a crazy twist, kind of a perfect cliffhanger, honestly, for this 2-part opening to the season. So I'm just kind of strapped in, ready to see what happens. It's this series has been this show has been so good so far. Opening has been so good, so action packed. The animation has been incredible. All the colors pop like a show. I haven't seen a show with colors that pop like this before. So yeah, it's been really good so far, and that was a crazy twist to end this 2-episode premiere.
Kendall, what did you think of the twist at the end with second Jean showing up?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, obviously, definitely, sets up a potential Madeline Pryor storyline, very much a potential Mr. Sinister storyline. I mean, I think, it harkens back to Young Justice fans and the whole Roy Harper storyline in that show. And again, sort of makes you question timelines. When was the body switch? If there was a body switch, when did this happen? Was the person was Jean at the door Madeline Pryor? It's not necessarily off the table, but obviously, like you said, with the backstory with Cable, you would assume that wasn't. You would assume that was the real Jean, and that's again part of like the Roy Harper kind of mind twist is that this other person you've been with this whole time is not actually Jean Grey. So I think that definitely again sets up a very interesting storyline. But yeah, no, I agree with Shamari. Perfect kind of cliffhanger. I also agree with Shamari. The animation and just the art. Shout out to Studio Mir because they did an excellent job. With making it feel new and updated and more advanced, but also feeling the same in terms of the character design. So again, they deserve a lot of credit there. But yeah, no, I think that just again, really, really good cliffhanger to end this episode on. I also really like this is sort of a more miscellaneous. But I also really like the end credits, like sort of video game, like
Oh, that's
character
cool
select
too. Yeah,
Yeah,
thing.
I love
You know, yeah. It
I
feels
agree.
like you said very 90s.
Yeah, yeah. Again, the detail, the attention to detail. That's I think attention to detail is a term I think that's so important when we talk about shows like this, especially shows that are homages and continuations for shows from different eras, um, made by different people. We know Bo DeMaio is no longer part of the project moving beyond season 2. We still don't quite know why that is. He is, of course, the executive producer of this show, the creator of this show. He was fired by Marvel pretty hastily prior to the world premiere of this show. There are some reports that he may have been really tough to deal with behind the scenes, but even that seems a little generic. You would think you wanted maybe, and it seems a little odd to then again fire him days before the thing. It feels like something maybe is gonna drop about him that we don't know, but I do know that the creation of this show as a whole, I was thoroughly impressed. I mean, my expectations were super high, but I think what I enjoyed about these episodes were there was a sense of urgency to everything that was happening that perhaps you didn't really get from the first uh maybe 2 or 3 seasons, in part because you had so many episodes per season. The episodes were so well done that even the filler episodes, like you can have a good time with those 21 minutes because they're just fun, they're good. But like there are some filler episodes where you're like, all right, this doesn't mean much, or like okay, they've spent maybe one episode too long in the Savage Land. Like, can we move the story along a little bit? Like there's some stuff where you say, okay, like, well, let's get going to wherever we're gonna do. How many times the guy see the Saran, go in someone's eyes and knock them out? Like, can we get some offense out? Like, in the wrestling matches, like, can we get some balanced offense where maybe the X-Men get some W's here? So, what I like about these episodes is the pacing of it. It's just, again, a lot more intense. There's just really aren't too many moments where you can just sit down and be like, oh, this doesn't really mean much. You feel like everything you're watching is super important. And I think because you're talking about a truncated 10-episode season, though that is the most we've seen of any of the animated shows for Disney plus for Marvel, is still truncated for what they did before. So I think that also added a little bit of, again, sense of urgency to these episodes. Did you feel the same way, Shan?
Yeah, yeah, I would agree with that as well. Um, yeah, I'm not sure. I agree with what you said. I'm not sure what exactly the situation is with them letting go of the creator of the series. That's kind of
Yep.
strange. Um, I agree. I guess we're gonna hear something about that going forward. Um, but I think as long as they keep kind of the core team, the same people that have been working on it, I'm not too concerned. And I'm honestly, I'm hoping we get personally, I'm hoping we get many seasons of this show going forward. I know it's called 97, but I mean, they can move. They didn't have to attach to 97. It could have been 97, 98, 99. I'm hoping we get more of this because I'm loving every
Yeah,
second of it.
this series, and they had already said he was, they already greenlit season 2, and he was actively working on season 3, and game plans for that. So I mean, it clearly has a future. And what I would say is that this series, I had some concern when they greenlit this show about this being the right introduction or reintroduction into the X-Men, for Marvel, knowing that they're also going to be making we got this Deadpool movie coming out, and then they're going to be making, their own X-Men at some point, live action movies. Were we going to be oversaturated with playing the hits with both the Deadpool callbacks that we'll likely get Hugh Jackman, and then with this, it's like, what is there room for new, so to
Right.
speak, or and I feel like after seeing these first 2 episodes that I feel more comfortable that no, this is a perfect dabble and again reintroduction for the X-Men in in popular culture. And I just think it really kind of shows you what we've missed, in the last 10, 15 years, where there's been this embargo on everything X-Men and Fantastic Four, that we've now, now that Marvel's openly acknowledging them as a brand, that there's just a lot that they can do. And this show's inherently, with, like you said, with Magneto running the team and running the show and everything, it's inherently kind of an oddball story to begin with. So it's not like I imagine that's not what the movie's going to be like. Um, and it's a continuation of an old show. So any inspirations you get were going to be inspirations from the old show anyway. So yeah, I mean, I think that the show again has a very bright future, even though
Definitely.
it is obviously a continuation of the older show. I will just say that I agree with Shamari's earlier point in terms of the only downside that I have is maybe that Storm storyline. I thought I agree that was like, you know, because she was done so well, throughout the episode, and like, they gave her this really, really, uh, you know, powerful, presence.
Yep.
It's unfortunate that you have to, strip it away, as they'd say in in the Black Panther storyline, but the Black Panther movies. But yeah, no, it was that was unfortunate. I agree with you, EJ, that a potential Wakanda storyline could maybe save it.
Yeah.
Could maybe save the storyline. But a sad, for replacing Sad Sack, Cyclops with Sad Sack Storm is not really a win for me. When, like Shamari
Yeah.
said, this is a character that's been shafted. It's been
Right.
shafted for over 20 years now in popular culture, and this is our first foray back into the character, and she's powerless. It's kind of like that it's like that Inhumans cutting Medusa's hair off in the first
Yeah.
episode. It's
Yeah.
like,
Man,
hey,
don't get me started on that.
great.
Yeah, yeah. That's my thing. Is like, you know, if she's powerless, like, is she going to be in the show? And if she is in the
Yeah,
show,
they
is
wrote
she
her
gonna
off.
be
They
in the
essentially
show
wrote her off the
powerless?
show.
That's the
Yeah,
question.
And
I get the impression we probably won't see much from her. Maybe in the next episode or two. I assume that we'll see more. I assume we'll get a whole Storm episode in one of these episodes where it's just her getting her powers back, wherever that is. So I think she'll get her time, but they clearly wanted to send her on a certain journey moving forward. That I don't think any of us would have made that character decision of Storm, but now when you make something so dramatic, it makes you say, okay, well, how do you pay that off? And there are ways. I think introducing Wakanda would be a big way to do that, but I'll be curious to see how they end up doing that. So let's give a final result here. So what are you guys gonna give this? I'll go Shan first. Out of 10, we'll do both episodes combined. You don't gotta separate each one. What would you give these episodes score out of 10?
I give it a 9 out of 10. Very, very, very high quality. Very high quality. Yeah, I can safely say it exceeded my expectations. Yeah, I didn't know what to expect. I was expecting it to be solid. A good homage to the original, something that I would enjoy. The animation would be, upgraded, more colorful. All I had seen up to this point were just kind of, the little bits that we'd seen, the uh, character figures and things that we've
Yep.
seen and what we've heard. But this is very, very high quality. This is very good animation. It stands up to the other kind of modern animated superhero shows that we've seen. So I got to give this a 9 out of 10. It would have been higher if they didn't, take away Storm's powers. But yeah, it's a 9 out of 10. Very, very high quality. Very much looking forward to seeing more of this.
Kendall, what are you giving the score of these two episodes?
I agree. I think I'm gonna go 9 out of 10 as well. I think again the intensity. The show is very, like you said, EJ. It's even more mature than it was before, and it's not mature in like dropping f-bombs everywhere.
Yeah.
You've got people dying or shooting
Yeah,
guns.
arms are getting cut off. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. It's like they played with a more mature rating, more mature platform in a way that was impactful and made sense, but still kept the same sort of tone as the original. So again, I thought that they did that really well, and all the characters were portrayed well. I think really just the key for going forward is just storylines. And what storylines will we get? Well, Wolverine. Wolverine was kind of more, a background character in these
Which
two
good.
episodes.
Like
Which,
honestly, like how
yeah,
many X-Men things we've seen where they just like spam Wolverine because they think that we want to just be hammered over the head with him. He's awesome. He's one of the greatest
yeah,
superhero characters we have. I love that he was kind of in the background, kind of doing his own thing. I love that he was the one that took Jean to the hospital. Like I think that
yeah.
they
He
were
wasn't
like,
in the fight. Yeah,
yeah, he wasn't in the fight. He kind of was like he kind of didn't seem like he wanted to be a part of the fight. He was doing Wolverine stuff. Like again, I really thought they like how they handled him was actually great because we know we're gonna get plenty of the Wolverine that we want to see. But
right.
I also think that like this Wolverine too. I think Morph being around, as we kind of saw when that little scene where like he turned into Sabretooth and they started like wrestling a little bit. Like I think Morph being around also makes him like just not as intense. Like we know how close a friend that is to him. Morph is now in a much better place. It seems like mentally and everything. So like, yeah, I mean he's gonna give Cyclops crap, but like he's gonna complain about stuff. But he's just not gonna be just like up up in the front all the time. Like, he's a loner. He's doing his own thing, which I actually thought this show did a good job of kind of embodying that with him in these episodes.
Yeah, 100%. And so, again, that's just going to be the evolution is seeing all of these different characters have, Gambit, like we talked about, wherever his character arcs go. Because like you said, there are, not as many episodes in this season.
Yep.
As we would traditionally get. So will these characters all get their shine, or will it be more of a collective storyline involving them all? And they kind of, no one really gets like an individual. Not everyone gets an individual storyline. So that'll be interesting, but it's set up really well. And will we get Charles Xavier? I mean, I think that's like the $1 million question. And I'm assuming over the 2 to 3 seasons that we are supposed to be getting, that we'll get him. I guess it's just the question: does it happen in this season?
Yeah, I think we get him. I think it happens probably in a season finale situation or very late in this season. Yeah, that's that. I think there's no question that we get him for sure. I also will echo the same score. I'll give these episodes a 9 total. Really strong coming out of the gates. I didn't necessarily expect that from this. I thought maybe we would kind of get them doing a little more of a slow burn. That's not what they did. They put us right in. I liked that the first episode felt very classic X-Men. Like, let's go. We got a mission. Let's take the Blackbird, go into a place that we're not welcome, and beat up some Sentinels, beat up Trash, beat up Master Mold. That felt like an episode I watched when I was 6 years old at home watching it on Saturday morning. Like, it just took me right back to that. Let's let Wolverine and Cyclops argue. Like, and they did it while also providing depth as well. It wasn't just purely nostalgia. Because I think, like, people have been hammering, oh, it's so nostalgic. And it is. But it's not nostalgic for the sake of nostalgia. Like, it's nostalgia advanced beyond what they even did in the 90s by again. I honestly think the added 6 or 7 minutes, because these episodes came out to almost about 30 minutes. And, of course, those episodes prior, because they were half hour plus commercial, you're talking about 21 minutes. I think those 6-7 minutes additionally of each episode also added a lot. I think it allows you to let conversations breathe. It allows you to let like scenes breathe. Like, you can't have those scenes of Magneto both in the UN Council and up where he took them up on the like the platform that he pulled from the UN. You can't have both of those scenes in a 21-minute episode. Those monologues each were like 3-4 minutes on their own. You can do that when you have an extra time to spare. So I think that like this show is definitely I don't say a leg up because we're on 2 episodes and we got to see how this goes, but it's definitely aiming to be a true advancement of what was established in that first show, which is all you can ask, because what happened in that first show was iconic. And I think this also, Kendall mentioned, this is a sign to say, hey, like, this is why the X-Men brand is so valuable. This is also why animation is valuable. I really hope that the excitement for this show, we'll get the streaming numbers, I guess, probably relatively soon, probably within the next week or so. I expect them to be massive because the social media conversation is massive right now. So LeBron James is tweeting out, star player for the Los Angeles Lakers, for those who are not basketball fans who may be watching us here, like, who's tweeting, where can I watch this X-Men show? Like, that, and maybe he was paid to do that, who knows? But still, even he was. The fact that he wanted to even do that shows just, like, how important this was. So, Awesome intro. They couldn't have started this better, and I cannot wait for the rest of this ride. But again, this is new. This is New Generation Media, New Generation Hero Talk. We're in that podcast we do weekly. You can find our audio podcast on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, SoundCloud, Stitcher, and TuneIn. We'll also be eventually doing all our weekly Hero Talk episodes also on YouTube as well. So that'll be happening at some point as well. But we'll be doing this especially for YouTube every week. Weekly episode recaps of X-Men 97. We'll be bringing you live streaming as well. So shout out to everybody on our YouTube page right now. I see we got almost 30 viewers right now, which is super high. One of the highest ones I think I've seen for a stream we've done. We've had consistent list of watchers throughout. Shout out to people on Twitter as well, because I know it's being streamed to my Twitter page as well. So shout out to everybody on Twitter next. Shout out to everybody on YouTube. Next time we do this, we'll try to even get more platforms out there to post these recaps. But I think that's going to do it, though, for this edition of a special edition of New Generation Hero Talk, our X-Men 97 episode recap. Thank you guys again. For my guy Shamari, for my guy Kendall, I'm EJ. Take it easy, guys. Peace.